So Jerry would like to generate a signal when there's two bars in a row that breach or break the current day's high, right? Or break the current day's low if it's a down day. So we want to wait for that second bar that makes, so you want two bars in a row, both making new highs or both making new lows, and then generate a signal. All right, so let's get an indicator on the chart here that we'll need to do this. So I'm going to use NinjaTrader's current day open high low indicator. All right, so the current day open high low, and let's see, we're not interested in the open, so I'll just turn that plot off, set it to transparent. There we go. All right, yeah, let's put this on the chart. And let's see. So let me find some examples here. All right, actually, right here's an example. So there we go. We got two bars in a row there that both made new lows. And let's see, we also have, we have the same thing back here. So there we go. We got a couple of bars that made some new lows right there. Yeah. All right, so we have some examples marked up on the chart, so we can get started now. All right, well, the first thing you want to do when you work with BloodHound, right, we have the button up here on the top that opens up BloodHound. So once you've added, obviously I already have BloodHound added to my chart here. So if I click on the button, that opens up the BloodHound interface. And the first thing you want to do is put a file name in here, right? We can see it's blank, there's no file name. So let me set up a file name, and just need to put today's date in there, the 15th. All right, hit save, and there we go. So I've got a file name saved here. All right, so once we have that, next, let's see, I might shrink the chart up a little bit. All right, so let's see, next I'm gonna switch over to the logic tab, and we will need to create a new logic template here. So I hit the new button, and now we can see there's a logic name that shows up there. So let's see, what should we call this? Call it 2-bar new high or low, something like that. All right, so I have some new lows to work with for today. So the key here is, figuring out what exactly, what prices are we working with. So if we're making new lows, well, we're looking at the low of the wick. So we're using the low price of the bar. So that's what we want to be examining, is the low price of the bar. But more importantly, we're using the current open high-low indicator, to track new low prices. So really what we're looking at is we're looking for the plot to move lower, and then the plot to move lower one more time. All right, so for 2 bars in a row, we're looking for that. We're looking for the indicator to move lower and lower. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing. Let's see here. Let's kind of scroll back here. So what we'll be doing is comparing, the current bar. The current bar's plot to the plot of 1 bar ago, right? The plot of the previous bar. We want to make sure that this plot had moved down. So we're comparing the plot of, let's mark this, right? So we're comparing the plot of this bar to the plot 1 bar back, right? We're comparing those 2 different plots there. So that would be using the comparison solver. So we're going to grab the comparison solver. See, I'll scroll in a little bit. So there we go. So let's see, let's give this a name here. All right, I'll just call it then a new high or low. And let's see, so input A, this will be the current bar. Input A will be the current bar. Input B will be the plot 1 bar back. All right, so input B will be 1 bar back. Input A will be the current bar. So what we need to do is set up the indicator that we're using. So let's open this up and let's go down and find the current day, open, high, low. There we go. Put that down there. And so for a short, right, we're wanting to generate a short signal when new lows are made, right? So using the current low, right, we're going to select the short column for the lows, and we're going to use the current high plot to generate a long signal. So there we go. All right, so the current high plot is going to use to generate a long signal. Current low plot is used to generate a short signal. So we'll just select it like that. All right, and this indicator, doesn't really have any settings other than you can turn plots on and off. So there's no settings here that we need to change. Right. So let's click OK. And all right, so input A is set for us. Now let's set up input B. All right, so let's scroll down to the C's, and there's the current day, open, high, low. And again, we're just going to select the same thing. We're using the current low for short prices, the current high plot for long signals. Click OK. Now, remember, I wanted input B to be 1 bar back, right? We want to analyze the plot of 1 bar back here. So that's what the Ninja's displacement function does. So if we put 1, basically that's a way of looking back 1 bar. So a displacement of 1 is essentially looks back 1 bar. So there we go. And I believe that's all we need to do, right? So the outputs here, the outputs should be set up. The default settings for the outputs should be what we want. That should be the setup that we want. So let's take a look here, and yeah, so we can see that whenever a new daily low is made, BloodHound is giving us a short signal, right? So there we go. We're halfway there. So now the next step is we want 2 bars in a row to be doing this. So so the way we can make sure that there's 2 bars in a row is essentially, let me grab an arrow. So essentially, we want to look for 2 outputs in a row. So we're going to look at 2 outputs in a row. So we have a spot there, and then over here there's 2 outputs in a row. So that's what we're going to be looking for. So this solver, we're looking for 2 outputs in a row, and that tells us that we had a second bar in a row with an output. So we can use the function lookback node. So we'll grab this lookback node. Let's plug that in there. Set that up. And the way we want to set this up, we want a lookback period of 2 because we need 2 bars in a row. And then you'll see the lookback mode. A mode option will appear. and we want a maximum of 2 bars in a row. And I'm sorry, we want a minimum of 2 bars in a row. There we go. Okay. And let's turn off the displacement. So we don't want a displacement. So let's set that to 0. There we go. And there we go. So we can see, over here, we had two bars in a row that made a new low. We got a signal. Then over here as well, 2 bars in a row made a new low. And if I scroll forward, yep, here's the other spot there. Yeah, so there we go. And let's look back to yesterday and see if there's any long signals as well. All right, yeah, yesterday was an up day. And yeah, so there we go. We had two up bars. This is late at night, but we had 2 up bars in a row, and it generated a signal. Let's see. Yep, so there we go. Yeah, yesterday should have a bunch of these going on. There we go. There's the RTH trading hours. Okay, so with that, let me take a look at the chat window and see if there's any follow-up questions on this. Okay, so now it doesn't look like there's any follow-up questions on this topic. Yeah, let me move on to some other questions that we have coming in here. Last week, we showed how to identify chop on an indicator. And so Alejandro wants to use that condition to make sure that trades are not taken when there is chop identified. All right, so with that, give me a moment here to get things set up, and then I can explain the question better. All right, so the first thing I'm going to need is the stochastics again. I'm going to use another chart here and get last week's workshop loaded up here. Let's see. No, it wasn't last week's. There we go. All right. So January 18th. Great. Okay. So let's see. StochasticsFast just with regular settings. Okay. All right. So I have, so there I've got the BloodHound workshop file opened from January 18th, and I could take a look at the logic in here. There we go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this solver. So we're just using the inflection solver. Yeah, all right. So let's get the other BloodHound open. All right, so I've got 2 BloodHounds open. So on the left here, I have the BloodHound file open from January 18th, and then of course on the right I have today's workshop file open. So let's see. Let's make a new logic template here. Let's see here. All right. So we want indicator, basically a choppy indicator to block signals. So let's see, let's grab a inflection solver. And so what I'm doing is I'm just essentially copying this solver setting here. Just copying that over, remaking it to make another copy on this other BloodHound template. All right, so there's our StochasticsFast indicator, and again, just using the default settings. And let's see, yeah, we're looking at the %D plot. Let's put that in there, and I notice, right, I had this slope against direction. I had that output set to 1, so I need to do the same thing there. And let's take a look. Yeah, so we can see that basically whenever the stochastics reverses up or reverses down, right? That's one way of kind of identifying a choppy indicator, like so. Let's see, and we also need a signal counter as well. So let's grab a signal counter. So the way the question was asked in this workshop on the 18th is the way it was asked, from what I remember. The customer wanted to know if an indicator had basically kind of, in this example, the stochastics had, done a bunch of reversing, really close to itself. And if it had, then that was considered basically like a choppy kind of situation. And actually, we have a good example right there. We can see the stochastics is just chopping up and down. And I'd say it's working pretty good in this example. We can see prices just, flatlined, chopping up and down there. So, so that's kind of what this is looking for. So, all right, so let's finish getting the signal counter set up. So I'm going to click on the signal counter on the left here so I can see the settings. All right, let's take a look. All right, so yeah, there we go. Yeah, so here we go. We can see, the stochastics making a nice sweeping move down, then a nice sweeping move up, right? And we definitely, the stochastics may not be perfect for identifying trends, but that really wasn't the gist of this question. The gist of the question is just finding a choppy indicator. But so we can see in here, right, this stochastics is not choppy as a relative term, right, but it's relatively not choppy, and so we're not getting any signals. So we want to use, so essentially, we want to use this area to allow trade signals to get through. So that's what Alejandro is looking for. So use this area when the indicator is not choppy to allow trade signals to pass through. So what we have to do is we have to reverse BloodHound's output to get this to work here. So So what we need is we need a signal output during this period when the indicator is running smoothly. So we need an output in this area here. There we go. So we need an output in this area here. And let's see. Look, we can do this actually with the signal counter. So if we look at the signal counter, if we look at the output section, it has a value at 0 count. So in other words, when the signal counter hasn't counted any signals from the solver, right? So this solver is what's identifying. This solver is identifying when the let's see here. So when we get these basically reversal points on the stochastic, right? So when there's so the signal counter is trying to count, these reversal points when they're really close to each other, when there's a bunch of them really close to each other. So if we go back here, right, so in this area, just get a little fancy here. So this area, right, we can see that the stochastics is reversing direction a whole bunch of times. Right, so it's, let's grab the diamond there, right, so it's reversal, right, reversal, and reversal. And so the signal counter is counting all these reversals, and when they're really close to each other, when they're really close to each other, it's identifying when those reversal points are really close to each other. So, and right, so let me actually reverse the output again here. So this is the normal output. All right, well, give me a moment here. Let me shut down Ninja. Get everything loaded back up here. Create the solvers again and the nodes. One thing I've noticed, if you guys ever, if you're ever getting NinjaTraders locking up when you're scrolling back, one thing I discovered is if you leave old drawings on your chart, that will cause NinjaTrader to lock up. If you have old stuff on your chart, yeah, I've noticed that maybe that's just my machine, but just as a little ninja tip there, yeah, I've noticed that to be the case. Sometimes I'll be scrolling back on a chart and it'll randomly lock up just before a chart object starts to scroll onto the screen. So I make it a habit of removing all my chart objects as often as I can, so that doesn't happen anymore. Let's put this back to a 1-minute chart. Alright, so that looks a little bit like a choppy area of the stochastics. And if we look at BloodHound, right, BloodHound's generating a bunch of short and long signals, alright, really close to each other. Alright, so I have let's see, that's one more change on the solver. There we go. So where I left off was basically explaining that, the workshop from January 18th was identifying the chop, but the question that Alejandro has is basically the opposite. So he would like to identify this area where the indicator is not choppy, and so that way signals can get through when the indicator is not choppy. And we want to block indicators, or I'm sorry, we want to block signals when the indicator is choppy, right? So we need to reverse the output here. So we actually need, we need a signal output when we want to allow signals to get through. And so to do that, actually the signal counter actually has a built-in way to do that. So there's actually two ways of doing that. We could take a inverter. We could take a inverter node, which will invert everything like so, right? So now if we look at BloodHound's output, right, we can see the output has now been reversed, right, versus doing this. So, but also the signal counter has a way of kind of inverting. So if we reverse the outputs there, like so, there we go. We're doing the same thing. So, so that's one less node we have to do, which is a good thing, right? The less calculations BloodHound has to do, then the faster NinjaTrader, will run, the more smoothly NinjaTrader will operate. So we can get rid of that inverter node and just reverse the outputs here, like so. All right, and so, but now with that, Next, we'll need an AND node, right, like so. And let's see, I'll need to build something here that will kind of mimic trade signals. So I'm going to take a inflection solver and just set it to price. Right? So I always use an inflection solver set to price to generate a ton of signals to kind of act as, you know, as a system here. Right. So we'll just pretend that this one solver here is basically your signals, right? Your trade signals. This is basically right the output of your trade signals, and you can see on my chart it generates a ton of signals here that I can work with. So this being, you know, your normal trade, this one node, you know, representing your normal trade signals, you will plug that into an AND node, and then, you know, take this logic here, take your signal counter, plug it into that AND node, and there we go. And so if we look at the chart now, right, we can see there's no signals are getting through when the indicator's choppy, right? And then signals are getting through over here, right? When the stochastics indicator is moving nice and smooth. Right, if we scroll back a little bit, yeah. So we can see the stochastic is essentially moving nice and smooth, you know, until about there somewhere. We can see some signals are getting through, but we can see here, you know, the indicator is getting a little choppy right there. So it's a little choppy, no signals. Let's take a look here. So we can take a look at the signals. Yeah, we can see there's just a ton of signals coming in here. And then when they're filtered, yeah, there we can see the signals are getting blocked there. So, all right, let's see, I think that does it for this question. So let me take a look at the chat window. Wave's got a question about building an exit signal when the distance between two trend lines starts to get smaller. All right, so Wave, when you say trend lines, do you mean something like a moving average trend line? Can you be more specific? What indicator are you using for your trend lines? All right, moving averages. Okay, sounds good. All right, so give me a moment here to get my chart addressed or straightened out. All right, let's see. I'll try something like an SMA 100 and 200. We'll see how that works out. See if that's something practical to work with. Yeah. All right. So I can kind of see, you know, the 100 and the 200 is, you know, they're moving away and towards each other. You know, yeah, and then eventually they'll cross each other. All right. There. All right. So the 200 is dashed, and the 100 SMA is the solid. So let's see here. Yeah, let's use this area as an example to work with. All right, so let's get BloodHound open again, and so I'm going to make another new logic template. All right, so we're going to identify when some trend lines get close to each other. Let's see. So basically, that's going to be the comparison solver. So really, you know, on a chart, when you're comparing on a chart, what do charts do? They just move up and down. So, so when you're doing a comparison, you're really the only two comparisons that you really have is, is one thing, is one indicator above or below another indicator, right? Or is price above or below an indicator? So when you're comparing stuff, charts just move up and down. Really, you just have the y-axis. You could say, well, you do also have time, and so you could extend something back in time forward, onto the current bar, but in the way charts work in their raw form, really it's just it's all about is one thing above or below another thing, like the stochastics. Where is the stochastics? Is it below 20? Is it above 80? Is it above 50? Below 50? Again, on a bar by bar basis, when you're looking at stuff, you're pretty much always comparing something being above or below something else. And so in this case, we're comparing two moving averages, and with the comparison solver, we can check for a difference between two plots, right? So so the comparison solver, its core function is checking to see, is one plot above or below another plot, but we can also throw in a distance between those two plots as well. So let's try, let's see, what am I on? Oil, and yeah, let's try 10 ticks. It looks like those two SMAs are getting within about 7 ticks of each other. So if I put a 10 tick distance, that should identify this area with the circle here. So, all right. So next thing to do is, basically plug in my two trend line indicators here. So let's take this SMA and let's set it to 100 period. Done there. And input B, we'll set this SMA, set that, change that to our 200 period to match what's on the chart. And let's see, what else are we wanting here? So now we need, I need to plug. Always remember to take your solver, plug your solver into the result node. So that way you can see stuff happening on the chart. So there we go. We're getting some results here already. Although it's not quite what we want. So on the output, really what we're looking for is when input A equals input B within 10 ticks. Right? So that's not quite, the default settings is not quite what we want. So we want to adjust these here. Like so. And let's see, let's give this a name here. Okay, there's some kind of a name here. So when the SMA 100, equals 10 ticks of the SMA 200. Let's see. Oh, oops. Look at that. Sorry. No wonder I'm not getting the right results. I actually put an SMA 50 on my chart and an SMA 200. So, that kind of illustrates, always make sure that, the settings you put in BloodHound match what you have on the chart. So I was thinking I was putting in the SMA 100, but I actually typed in the SMA 50. Sorry, so let me change this in BloodHound here, right? That you can see this says estimate 100. So that's why things were not matching up correctly. Let's put a 50 period in there. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so now we can see on the chart, we can see, right, there's an output now that identifies when those two SMAs are within 10 ticks of each other. So if I wanted to really narrow this down here, it looks like they're getting within 7 ticks of each other. Yeah, there we go. Narrow that down a little bit. So let's take a look. There. All right. And there we go. Yeah, we had a crossover. So obviously the crossovers and just before a crossover, those are all going to be identified. There. All right. Let's see. From Wave. There we go. Wave. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Wave says here, how about 3 and 21? All right. Yeah. Well, let's make that adjustment. All right. 3 and 21. And then we'll go into BloodHound and make that adjustment as well. And let's see, 3 and 21, those are a lot closer together. So how about if I knock the distance down to 3 ticks maybe? There we go. Something like that. And of course you can just, go in here and adjust your tick difference there as you see fit. All right, let me take a look at the chat board here and see what else we have. All right, well, you're welcome, guys. Again, email your questions in ahead of time if you'd like. I always appreciate those emails. It's a reliable way to get the workshops started. And then usually once a workshop gets started, you guys usually come up with all kinds of other questions, which is good too. So, okay, guys, with that, if I don't see you in tomorrow's Blackbird workshop, then have a good weekend and hope to see you guys next week. Bye-bye.